on an episode of Eternally Bored here. We have a guest. He's trying to beat mother guilt. Now, as a side show, you know that nothing makes it worse than a mother. You should probably be calling your mother right now instead of listening to this podcast. However,
don't you feel bad that you're doing this podcast instead of talking to your mother right now?
No, because then I'd have to talk to her about it, and she'd be asking me, well, how much money are you making? What is it for?
There's money? You guys didn't tell me there was money.
Why are you just doing this?
I had to bring my own drink.
Exactly.
You guys didn't tell me there was money.
You know, or why should I be... It's like, I really want to support what you're doing, but I just don't understand what you're talking about. But anyways.
Well, you tell your mother that as one of the most prolific game designers in the Houston area, Trey and I have each made many tens of dollars in this industry.
So... Hey, today on Eternally Bored, we're talking about mothers and board games.
We're talking about mothers and board games.
Mother's Day podcast.
I can chuck these notes. I'd rather talk about mothers and board games than these notes. That's fine.
All right.
My mother does not play board games.
Oh, my mother's a chess master.
Oh, nice.
Goodness.
And she was briefly ranked as a grandmaster, so she's been beating me up and down the board table.
You know, both my parents...
45 years.
Both my parents played games when I was a kid, and now they don't play games at all.
So
really?
You grew up?
Now that I make games, they're like, oh, I don't really like board games anymore.
What?
They're so weird.
How did that happen?
They taught me how to play Risk. They taught me how to play chess, Monopoly.
So I've heard of kids getting into things specifically because their parents don't. But you're telling me your parents got out of something because you do like it.
Apparently.
That's the saddest story ever. All of us should hang up right now. We should turn off the cameras and go call our moms and apologize.
Well, my mom met my father in the arcade, so they used to
okay.
hang out there. So, but she never played any video
So
games.
that was actually not about parents.
No, it is.
This is all going on the cutting room floor, right? We're not actually running.
This is
This is recording, and this is going to go on the YouTube. I don't know if it'll go on the podcast, but it's going on the YouTube.
Oh, the podcast would love.
I edit a lot before our videos come out. We have a good 15, 20 minutes at both ends where we're planning up and tearing it down that we cut.
I only cut the video when they curse.
Oh, okay.
I
I
never
has
curse.
cursed too, but
Like-
anyways.
Not true. I never cursed.
Like
in my
what
life.
level of cursing? Like NC-17 cursing or like PG? Like can
I
I
cut
do
the rated
after
R.
9 p.m. TV cursing?
It's PG, so you can
Okay,
let
okay.
if you want to talk about beavers building dams, that's fine.
So I can say booger. Okay, I can say booger.
That's
All
allowed.
right.
Okay, you can
Dr.
read,
Johnny Fever in the house.
You can read approximately half of the Cards Against Humanity cards, and you'll be fine.
I've never played Cards Against Humanity.
Well, we might talk about it today. But
Okay,
anyway,
fair
today on Eternally Bored, we're going to be discussing the idea of theft in board games, both legal and questionably legally.
Questionable legality, yeah.
Yeah. And in addition, I'll let Trey go this far. I've talked too much already.
All right.
No such thing.
And we're also going to go over our top 10 derivative games by different designers. So, like, we're not counting games that were, like, Pandemic and then Pandemic Legacy. We're not doing that because the designer of Pandemic was involved in Pandemic Legacy. But games where clearly a different designer took an idea and then expounded upon the idea, copied most of an idea. So that will be our top 3 today. And we also have a special guest, Kevin Nunn. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Kevin Nunn. I'm another Houston area board game designer like Trey. I've been designing since about 2001 is when I decided to become professional about it. Although I wrote my first game in 1981.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Sitting in the back of a very dull art class, pretending to pay attention, and I wrote an RPG, and it was terrible. but that's when I discovered I had the bug.
Was it inspired by Zork?
No, it was not. Now, I think you underestimate how old I am.
Okay.
There was not Zork. Or if there was Zork, I was not cool enough to have access to said device. My first computer was this $100 solid state model. It had basic hardwired in and touch sensitive buttons that you push down, not a full keyboard.
Oh.
So it was,
Wow.
and it had, now don't y'all drool now, but it had 16K of RAM.
Oh, my
And that's because I
goodness.
bought the extra 8K package.
whoa!
Right. And for the time I was styling, so that was pretty cool. No, so that's when I started designing, and then right after I got married, Deborah and I were talking, and I decided to make it a profession, and now I've been doing it really aggressively for the last coming up on 20 years now.
Do you want to maybe plug some of your games that are in print?
Well, I'm going to sort of sideways plug some of my games because some of them are on our derivative list. but the big things I have going right now from Amigo Spiele in Germany is All You Can Eat, which was originally designed in partnership with Mayfair Games, but as you viewers at home probably know, Mayfair Games no longer exists as an entity. It was absorbed into the military-industrial complex that is. I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying that.
We cannot. No, we cannot talk badly about the overlords.
Hey.
Right. So there's a company who I'm sure is full of delightful people that has absorbed quite a number of other companies lately.
There's nothing wrong with a little, consolidation of power.
I am Acutus of Asmodee.
Yes, I enjoy Asmodee games. I enjoy
Honestly, I'm fine with some consolidation, but I am worried that we're going to see Hasbro again, because if you look at Hasbro owns Milton Bradley, and they own Parker Brothers, so you can be in your friendly neighborhood like big box store like a Target and think you're looking at 5 different companies' games, and they're actually all Hasbro. Right. And that's where I worry a little bit, because I think a little bit of market competition is healthy, and different divisions of the same company, that's not really, true competition.
We'll probably do a whole episode on this at some point, and we'll probably invite you back.
I'll get so many letters. I'll be in so much trouble. Yes.
I mean, as long as the board game industry doesn't reach the same standards as the eyeglass industry, we should be fine.
Oh, really? So I don't wear glasses, so I don't know about this. You have to tell me about
90%
this.
90% of all eyeglasses are made by the same company.
Oh, really?
Lens
Is this like
Crafters,
DeBurse and Diamonds?
No, not just made. Sold.
Yeah, made and
sold and manufactured all by the same company.
Now wait a minute. Didn't Congress decide, like in the 40s or 50s, that Hollywood could not own both the studio and the theaters that aired the movies?
That's before lobbyists took over.
Oh, okay. All right.
But
I brought entirely the wrong notes. I did not know the political conversations we were going to have.
We can do
going to get so many
letters.
letters.
We go deep on this podcast.
I know. I was not prepared. I was like, we'll talk about some happy little games. Oh, no. We're going to get real up in here. Okay.
Anyways, you plugged a few of your games. Trey, do you have any games that you would like to plug?
Oh, yeah. But is Rolling Freight still in
Rolling Freight is absolutely still in print, and Rolling Freight, there are a couple of games that inspired it that I want to give a shout out to some great games.
You're going to talk about it later.
I am. Rolling Freight is still in print.
You're doing a vlog, right?
Mm-hmm. I am doing a vlog. I have a blog at kevingnunn.com, but for various reasons I stopped adding content to it. And one of the reasons was I kept thinking that I had fallen too far behind the tech curve. That it was time to get away from blogs and go toward vlogs like we're doing here. So now I've gotten into vlogging, and lately the first few videos we have up, we have a couple of game reviews, we have several recaps from RPGs that we've played. We have a running campaign where we do a recap after each session, but we've also been going out there and trying a lot of independent RPGs. And after we play one, if it excites us, then we come back and talk about it. We don't want to get into panning games that we don't like. We don't want to insult somebody's labor of love. But when we come across one that really excites us, then we'll shoot a video and talk about that. And we're going to start doing more of that with the board and card game stuff as well. Like I recently played Fox and Forest. And
how was that?
I loved it. I was really concerned. I apologize, I don't remember. I believe, don't quote me, I believe it's Dominic something. Okay. Anyway, I saw it around Gen Con, but I was really busy at Gen Con demoing for other people and a little bit of my own stuff. And so I never got to play it, but I kept hearing good things. So I went to friendly local game store in Houston, Dragon's Lair, with a buddy of mine, and they have a very large open-to-play game library, which is really sharp on their part, because then we took it out, we played one hand of it, and I was like, I'm buying this. Mm-hmm. And he similarly took out another game that he was iffy on, looked at all the bits inside and said, I'm buying this. So having that open library, that's something FLGSs can do that the online stores can't do, is give you a chance to sit down and actually sample the product.
That's true. We had an episode talking about that as well. The problem with that is you usually have to be in a more rural place, because this place, the Dragon's Lair, is actually outside of Houston, correct?
It's outside the city limits.
Outside the
Yeah,
city
it's a couple
limits,
of miles
yeah.
outside the city limits. It is half a mile from my house, which is
okay.
ridiculously convenient for me. And that's how we came to be there. We had a role-playing session, and then we were like, let's go to Dragon Slayer and spend more money on games. and we did. And anyway, so, we should really be talking about Fox and Force. So for those of you who don't know it, it's a 2-player trick-taking game. You deal 13 cards to each player, and then you have some other cards that are set aside. And every odd-numbered card has a special power. And it's the same for each odd number.
Okay.
So all the 1s have the same power, all the 3s, all the 5s, all the 7s, right? And when you first hear it, the red flag that goes up in my brain is this is going to be really chaotic and random. And having played it now a good half dozen times and being really into trick-taking games, I can say with confidence that you have a lot more control over how the hand plays out than it might seem. Now, I can also tell you that everybody else has more control than I do because I haven't won not once. I've played against people who've never played. I sat down, I taught them the rules, and they beat me. Everybody's beating me, but every time I lost, I felt like it was because they outplayed me, and I just haven't found my groove on that game. But yeah, it's a nominal price. I don't have a horse in that race. They're not giving me a kickback, although I wouldn't mind. But it's a good game. It really is. So that's one I've been enjoying
game
a
is
lot
good
lately.
when you suck at it and you still enjoy it.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I'm not even sure a game is still good if it's the other way around. If you lose and you don't want to play again, did you only want to play if you won? I mean, that's not a good sign for a game.
That's true.
If you have fun losing.
Yeah, and when you don't have fun winning, it's also
that's
a good
that's
sign
that's
for
a
the
terrible
game.
sign.
It's a terrible
I've
sign
played a
for
lot of
game.
games like that where I won, but I didn't care and I never wanted to play the game.
Yeah,
Right.
I have finished with this particular thing.
Absolutely.
So I have to make a couple of plugs before we move on to our topic du jour, which is going to be a lot of drama. We're sipping some tea today, even though I don't have tea currently, but
I do.
Oh,
I brought
excellent.
tea.
All right.
I brought tea.
I need to brew some tea.
You also have Southern Comfort, right? Same cup? No. Anyways.
I don't drink during the day, gentlemen.
All right, so this probably is going to be published within the last few days of my Kickstarter of Imperial Spells in Steam. That's EMPYREAL. It's a pick up and deliver game by Level 99 Games, so check that out. It's a train game, but it's a totally different take on train games. Much like Kevin's. Kevin's is a dice-based train game, right?
Yes, it's a dice-based resource management pick up and deliver rail game with boats.
Yes.
I'll explain it all later, I promise.
All right, and my train game is level 99, so it's tons of powers, all the player powers that you can imagine in that game. So
That is
check
definitely
that
a
out.
chunk of the industry. Level 99 is carved out well.
Yes.
Every card has powers, and sometimes they have 4 or 5
Usually
powers.
4 or 5.
Literally,
exactly.
literally
And-
everything has powers.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes Pixel Tactics so great, right? Is that here's 5 different powers on this one card. Which one would you like?
Yeah. Yes, and I also would like to plug one of our sister podcasts, which is Botch Games today. Botch Games is a Punchboard Media podcast, so check them out. They have a lot of great content. They also do YouTube reviews, and the guy who runs it, Craig, has a degree in English, much like yours truly. So, and much like me, he's not really doing anything with it.
You speak to people all the time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
teach kids. That's what people with degrees
Well,
do.
no, I mean, yeah. What English people with English degrees do? They typically are teachers,
Yeah.
and that's me.
There you go.
So so our topic du jour is basically theft, questionable and unquestionable. So I first want to mention the best way to do it, which is take it, really add something to it and change it significantly, and then also give credit to your inspiration. So the good example I would use is Defenders of the Realm, where the designer, he's a super famous designer, and I'm blanking on his name, but basically the designer he took Pandemic and then made it a fantasy game and added combat and added all these things, but even though it was a very different game and he didn't have to, he still gave credit to Pandemic for being the inspiration. So I think if you're going to adapt an idea, then that's the way to do it. Change it significantly and then still give credit to your inspiration. But then we have other more questionable situations, such as the Insider Werewords situation.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I just played Werewords last night, so I've played Insider many times, but last night Charles was kind enough to bring Werewords to Tabletop Day, and so got a chance to play it, and I can tell you it's not very different from Insider.
It's inspired by, definitely, and it's one of those cases where you can clearly see the influence, and the fact that there's no mention and they're actually fighting about the fact that there is an influence is sort of bad in and of itself.
Well, so I did a bit of research on this, and I've known Ted Alspach for a number of years,
Right.
and who did the design work at Bezier. And so there are two things I would bring to the table. One is that I know, having known Ted for a number of years, I've known for a long time that he's a guy who's very good at building on other people's work, right? So before Bezier was really a big open concern and he was really doing that full time, he did Age of Steam maps under an open license that Age of Steam had. He was one of a couple of guys who would release 1 or 2 Age of Steam maps a year. And he also did an expansion he just released it for free on the web, expansion for Reiner Knizia's Fits, which, in case you don't know, it is kind of a Tetris game that Reiner wrote in the mid-2000s.
Pretty good game.
Oh yeah, I like it a lot. But I've played Reiner's expansion for it, and I've played Ted's expansion for it. And Reiner's expansion was, here's 4 more of the same, right? And Ted said, okay, how could we take this game and do something new and different with it? So Ted has a good history of this. I've also read Ted's official statement on the subject of Insider versus Werewords, and Ted claims that he was developing an idea of his own and came upon Insider and approached them. He's posted a couple of emails which he claims were email communications he had with them, and he approached them to try and get some licensing to make it official.
Yeah.
But they eventually stopped responding. Now, it's impossible to prove a thing didn't happen, right? That's the thing we learned from watching Dick Wolf, Law and Order, many episodes. You cannot prove a negative. But I can say from my experience, having worked in the industry a long time, it's not strange to be in communication with somebody and them to just flake out and disappear. Kevin Brusky at Ape Games and I were in negotiation to get licensing to do a comic book, and we were having a really great, enthusiastic conversation back and forth. And one day he reached out to them, and the comic artist's assistant, who was the person that we went through, said that they were no longer interested, and she had been told not to talk to us anymore.
Oh, jeez.
Right? And we've never known why, but these things happen. And I've had some other instances, because I work a lot with licensed properties, and I can't tell you how many of them fell through because one party in the chain decided we're not going to do this.
Or they decided to develop in-house or something of that nature, which is actually with another game. I mean,
we're going to come to talk about that other game a little later.
Yeah.
But so, while I do agree that you can definitely see a lot of Insider in Werewords, I can also see the counter-argument that Ted came up with this idea independently, saw similarity, and tried to do something collaborative with them, and then it just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And in that case, I can't blame him for saying, I've put this sweat equity in, and I'm pretty well branded in werewolf-type games. I think we should go ahead and publish.
And I feel like there's enough of his game in it to make it a little bit different. Like, I can tell the differences. Some of them I like, some of them I don't. You can, of course, just play it directly like Insider, or you could use like the Werewords rules on top of it. And what he has added to the game, I've really enjoyed. In this game, there's fundamentally like another game ending condition. And a chance for everyone to play. So there's no dedicated.
Well, no matter how this one ends, there's always the final twist, right?
And then he also added the app, and that adds a infinite number of words that are not normally in the game. So
he can pull words out when he's getting feedback that they're not working. He can add words. It makes it a little more dynamic.
So I see the extra work, and I had no problem with getting Werewords, even though I knew this controversy, basically because you already had Insider, and we wanted to talk about the subject. So there you go.
Well, I have played both. Personally, for my taste, Werewords killed Insider. I don't need to play Insider anymore because Werewords exists. Do I know who invented what first, and did somebody copy somebody else? Because I've known Ted for a number of years, I'm inclined to believe him. But I have no proof. I have read Ted's version that he published out to the world, and it passes the sniff test for me.
Okay.
But these are the conversations we need to have. Parallel design does happen, and theft almost never happens. But almost never doesn't mean never. And when it does happen, it needs to be ferreted out, and the people in question need to be, I don't know, taken out, tarred and feathered, and run out on the rail, and whatever other American colloquialisms I can pull from the Old West.
Yeah.
Trey?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% believe Ted. Like, I've met Ted. He seems like a nice, genuine guy, and I don't think he did anything, like, untoward here. The only thing I wonder is, like, how much, like, he was developing parallel design, but did he take, once he played Insider, did he take some of those ideas and incorporate them into his own design that he already had, or had he already started developing very similar mechanisms to Insider, and that, really
let's talk
know.
as designers.
Yeah.
I know that when I hear somebody's got a game out there, or I'm at a prototyping convention, which I try to get to at least 3 or 4 a year, and I run one here in Houston, and I hear somebody's got a game that sounds like one of mine, I rush out to play it.
Yeah.
To make sure that either I'm bringing my own voice to it, that we're not just writing the same game, or, honestly, I look for flaws in theirs that I could come up with a different solution to, right?
Yeah.
Because there are some questions in game design, like, say, in deck builders, people are still asking, should a deck builder just be about deck building, or should we write the other half of the game?
Yeah.
And there have been a bunch of conversations about that, and I don't think anybody has definitively answered that. And so that makes it an interesting and exciting place to design games, right? So what do you do when you're working on a game and you hear that somebody else is developing something that sounds similar? Do you run the other way to keep your ideas untainted? Do you run toward it, or do you just kind of let life happen?
I haven't really been working on a game that I've heard. There's a game that just came out that's like it. It's more like I've taken games and tried to improve upon them. Like I played At the Gates of Loyang, and then kind of like I like that game a lot, but there are definitely flaws in it, and so like I took that design and I tried to improve upon it, and everyone that I've played that prototype with actually is like, wow, yeah, this is like At the Gates of Loyang, but better.
Because you can probably play 3 or 4 players.
Yeah.
Well, your farming game for me solved all my issues with, and I hesitate to even compare your farming game to Agricola, because they only look similar in the most vague ways, but yet your farming game scratches all the itches of Agricola without being the long play length and complexity of Agricola that always felt a little dry to me.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm sure other people think the opposite, but I'm here to polish your helmet.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, Agricola is 100% the inspiration for Harvest. So yeah, I was like, how can we make Agricola into less than an hour experience? And that's just like the basis that I started from. But yeah, back to your original point, if I was developing a game and I heard that there was a similar game just released in that realm, then I would totally do what you said and play it and see if it's like, okay, do I need to change my game now? Is it too similar, or is there ways I can improve upon this design? So yeah, I definitely think that's the right strategy.
Well, as a designer, has anyone ever come up to you, either one of you, and just said, I really enjoyed your game quite a bit. Would you look at my prototypes because it's sort of inspired? Have you ever been placed in the circumstance?
Not as such, but I have certainly had people in my design group say, I really love that idea, I'm stealing it. To which I say, personally, I say, go for it, Right. I'm happy to see my ideas go out there and see different people's approach, right? When Picasso and Braque invented collage, that didn't stop other people from creating interesting collages, right?
Right.
But, it is a spectrum, right? You don't want somebody to photocopy all the components of your game and put them in a box and sell them.
Right.
But on the other hand, well, your game has card shuffling, my game has card shuffling, so that's clearly not theft, right? There's somewhere in between photocopying a game and both of our games roll dice is this line, and it's very fuzzy.
Very fuzzy.
That's between inspired by and stolen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I've been wrestling with that question for a long time, because you can't design in a vacuum. You can't go back and start with, checkers. You have to look at what people have invented and what people have developed and try to build on it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't just wholeheartedly copy. So has anyone specifically brought me a game and said it was inspired by? No. But while playtesting, people have said, that's a really neat idea. I want to steal that and try and do something with it. And I'm like, you don't need to steal it. You take it. Go for it. I would love to see what you do with that idea. And that's happened to me a number of times with a number of different mechanisms.
Okay.
And
And
I
when
take
I-
it as praise.
Yeah, I do see when the mechanisms get copied, when someone actually makes a new mechanism, I have seen a number of games that, try to improve upon the mechanism or make it more complicated. The most recent example that I think a lot of people know is Hanabi, because Hanabi has a certain, you don't see your cards, other
Right,
people
right.
do mechanic. And I've been seeing like probably about 4 or 5 games that have come out since, when did Hanabi come out? 2015? Since
sounds
then,
about right.
that have, they're not Hanabi, but they're using Hanabi as one of their
Starting
base
points.
mechanics and then adding on to it from there. So
I got you. So have people brought you things
Yeah.
inspired by your work?
No, but I have played games, worker placement games in particular, that I'm like, I feel like these people played Argent before they designed this, And I got a chance to talk to the publisher of Sons of Anarchy. So in Sons of Anarchy, it's a worker placement game, and similar to my game Argent, you can injure other people's workers and they go to an infirmary. And it's very similar to how it works in Argent. And so I went to the publisher and I was like, did y'all play Argent? Just curious. And they were like, no, we've never played Argent. And hey, I believe them. Like Kevin pointed out, parallel design happens, and it just so happens that their game was similar to mine in that respect. But I mean, and then the whole workers, one of the main mechanisms of Argent is your workers have different powers. And so every time I play a worker placement game like Anachrony or Manhattan Project, and the workers have different powers, I'm like, I wonder if they played Argent
inspired by Argent.
and inspired. It's just a question. Obviously I want people to use that mechanic because I design games with mechanics I like. So
Sure.
please use it as a permission. But it's just an interesting question that comes to mind. It's like, I wonder if they ever played my game and were perhaps inspired by that. So, yeah. So yeah. Speaking to the spectrum, so it goes from straight up theft and then just very vague similarities. And where is that line? It's really hard to tell. There's a couple of other situations in the industry that I wanted to bring up. One is the situation with Root. Root apparently, the company that is publishing Root, they played a space game, and it was a very asymmetrical space game, and basically the designer of that space game, I'm forgetting the name, but it's not published, so
Yeah, I was reading that article this
Yeah.
morning.
Oh yeah, do you remember the name of the
I sadly don't. I wanted to find. I didn't want to bring anything onto the show that I hadn't thoroughly researched.
Yeah.
And I felt like I found one article, but I didn't find enough corroborating sources, so I didn't put that one in my notes.
Yeah, I read all the designers' thread about it. Just blanking on the name, but it might get changed if it ever gets published. But
The designer's name.
yeah,
Yes.
the designer
designer's name
and
might
the
be-
game.
and the game,
But
probably,
there is a space game that the designer claims that Root is basically a copy of, and so that was disheartening because it's I like the company, I like what they're doing with Root, and Root looks like a really interesting game. But how much were they influenced by? Basically, he claims that they had a contract for this game. They eventually stopped developing the game and were just like, hey, we're releasing it back into the wild. And then they developed this other game, Root, which the designer claims has a lot of inspiration from their original design. And then nothing against the designer of Root. The designer of Root says that he was not involved in that at all. This is just from the publisher. That's basically the publisher's excuse is this is a different designer and he came up with all these ideas themselves. But the designer of this space game is saying that no, they had signed a contract and they were developing the space game, and then they took those basic design mechanics and then developed them into Root. And so I'm like, wow, that's dicey, because if it's just basic mechanics, can you even really say that that's theft? I mean, it's not really theft at that point. But at the same time, the fact that they cut his contract and then developed this other game with some similar mechanisms, it's tough. It's a very blurry line, to say the least.
Yeah. So when I've pitched, I've only pitched a few times to really top tier publishers like Mattel, and when you sit down for a meeting with Mattel, they have you sign an NDA that absolves them if they release a game that looks too much like what you're showing them. And the rep I was talking to, I said, I understand you need this to protect yourselves because you talk to a lot of people. And he said, no, well, it protects both of us. And I looked at the NDA and I didn't see anything in there that protected me. But I did understand why when you're a big name company like that, you're going to have a lot of different people coming at you. And it's very likely that you're going to get multiple people pitching the same idea. Particularly with a company like Mattel, who focuses on very smaller, very light rules, very short rule set. You know, the pool for that is kind of small, right? You do a big box 3-hour game, there are lots of directions you can go. When you shave a game down to the bones and you get it to be a 20-minute game, not that there's no room for creativity, but it's a lot easier for two people to come up with the same core idea, and for them to then look a whole lot alike. So I understood from their point of view why they'd have to protect themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in intellectual property law a bit on the back end, and it's just like you can never tell when someone's going to try to take something that's from you, or vice versa. You have people higher up who are going to be desperate enough to just take the first idea that comes along, and you see it all the time. It is very hard to prove, though. I mean, the burden of proof is on usually both parties, and in general, what happens in the legal field is one party has more money than the other, so they can afford to force them to settle, or just literally crush them underneath so much of litigation that they don't have the money to fight back or get to them. And then I've seen it in the board game industry as well. I mean, luckily, since the community is so insular, word of mouth and these debates generally take place in the court of public opinion, and the court of public opinion can get people to literally not purchase your game at all, or give you negative buzz, which is almost in a very marginal industry. Negative buzz is almost like
it's a
death wish, right? A death knell. So,
to the aspiring game designers out there. We have very little to no legal recourse, by the way, if someone just jacks your game. Like, this industry basically...
But you do have word of mouth.
Yeah, it runs on the honor system, and that's basically your best method, as sad as that is, because the flip side of that is if you go on these forums and you start saying, like, hey, this company stole my game idea, that's going to make other publishers wary to work with you, because, like, what if they publish a similar game? They're going to worry that, like, you might come after them. So it's really tough out there for designers, because we don't really have a legal recourse, and there's some major disincentives to not go public if something like this does happen. It's tough.
This is one of the reasons that I playtest my games very publicly.
Yeah.
My best recourse is, here's 50 people who all played my game 3 years before you announced.
Right.
They saw me developing it. They were involved in the development. They gave feedback, and look how your game looks almost the same. And I keep a record of all my communications with publishers. I've never had to draw on any of that. I've been fortunate that's never happened to me, and I know it's extremely rare. But it does only take one or two of these to frighten you, and that's sad, because this industry should be, because it is a small industry, because it is a cottage industry, because it's full of people who aren't in it to get rich, but because they love what they do.
Yeah. You will not get
word
rich.
spreads fast. Yeah.
You will not get rich publishing games unless you have like a Dominion or something like that. But that's 1 in a million.
Unless you create a mechanic that other people just cannot
live without.
Cannot live without.
And then you'll get lots of people doing their take on it naturally.
Yeah, right? You won't get any residual income, unfortunately.
Well, the original deck builder is actually StarCraft, right? It's not even Dominion. Like StarCraft pioneered that mechanic, but Dominion gets all the credit for creating like in-game deck building. But it wasn't. It was StarCraft.
No, StarCraft used it to represent the time it took to build a unit.
Yeah.
Although Dominion is what broke it loose from being the rest of the game and said, we're going to make a game just about this.
And not to mention all the collectible card games that preceded, the boom and stuff, where, the impetus in order to make these systems where you didn't have to buy 1 million packs of cards was, like Magic, and I don't know if Magic really has anything that was really before it, because they were just...
So Magic and the Star Trek TCG came out, were developed simultaneously, separately.
Right.
Oh,
that's
wow.
That's why they played so completely differently. was because they were completely uninfluenced by each other.
Ah.
They came out just neck and neck.
Wow, I did not know.
I heard about Magic first, and then I heard about Star Trek. But what I've heard from people who are in the industry is that the Star Trek game was being developed internally to one company at the same time that Magic was being developed at WotC, and so they just released back to back. But Magic had the flair or the style, if you will, that captured people's imagination. I mean, they both had really good hooks thematically, but Magic had the gameplay hooks that happened to exceed what Star Trek achieved. And that's why so many of them look like Magic in some form.
Oh,
And then conversely, you have a lot of the dying baseball and sports card trading companies. Once Magic started to take off, go to Japan, where a lot of their printers were, and start picking up some of the derivative games there and bringing them over as well as quickly as possible.
Sure.
In order to, it's like now
Well-
we're printing Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, Pokemon.
Well, it's as a friend said, I collected image cards at the time, right? I collected art cards. And he said, look, these are art cards. They cost the same, except you can play a game with them. It's like, well, you got me there. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how I started playing Magic, is I already collected art cards, and these were art cards I could play a game with. So, there wasn't a downside.
Exactly.
Before we move in on our top three, I do want to bring up. So we talked about some questionable situations, but there's one, and this is the first that I've heard of, thankfully, that is, I think, a guaranteed case of just straight up idea theft, and that is the Alien Nostromo controversy.
USCSS Nostromo versus the game Nostromo.
Yeah. And in France right now, a French publisher called Wonder Dice. And actually, Bruno Fedudi is the one who called them out. So good on him for because the designer is not well known, and he is.
Francois, I wrote his name down. Francois Bachelor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Bruno Fedudi kind of took it upon himself to just call this company out and say look, this is a new designer. He came up with this idea, and they just straight up stole his idea and still released the game, or is releasing the game with just all his mechanics basically copy and pasted with a few subtle changes. I've read about the changes, but they are definitely not to the. It's not they took his game as inspiration and then released their own version of it. It's more they tweaked 2 or 3 small rules but basically just stole his idea. And
95%, if not 98%.
So I haven't actually read the rules. You can read both versions of the rules online, although they're in French, and I don't read French, so I did not sit down and read them. I did read a lot of people's reports. I read Wonder Dice's report. The best thing I can say about Wonder Dice is, even if everything they're saying is honest, they're kind of being jerks about it. They could have been a lot, even if they honestly did develop this other thing in parallel, even if, then there's no reason to behave the way they are, to counter-threaten. We have a president who likes to threaten to sue everybody who says anything he doesn't like. And we won't name his name because he's not entitled to that kind of attention. But
Voldemort.
yeah, Voldemort.
And we're not on Twitter.
Yeah,
we don't tweet out the episodes. So
I don't care what he thinks of me, but I can't be bothered to say his name. But when your first response to anything anybody says is "I'll sue you," yeah, it doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make you look like a nice person. They claim, Wonder Dice claims that the game that Francois Bachelor submitted to them was much more light and like a family game, and that their version is a gamer game. And certainly some parts there's no getting around. I mean, Alien takes place almost entirely on board the Nostromo.
Right.
So what's your game going to be about? It's going to be about the Nostromo, right? But that he brought them a game with all these elements, and then their game has so many of the same elements, like there have been a couple of fighting games that came out lately that looked a whole lot like a game Luther Hendricks and I published a few years ago. And I take it as a compliment, right? Mm-hmm. But what if I had submitted that fighting game because unpublished, and then somebody 6 months later comes out with a game that uses almost all the same mechanisms, right? Mm-hmm. You would be nervous. You would be bothered by that, and I totally understand. and that because Bruno spoke representing the French sort of union of game designers, right? That union is not the right word, but
association. Yeah.
Association.
Does the U.S. have one yet?
The U.S. does not have one that I'm aware of. I belonged to the German one for a number of years, but as I moved away from working with German publishers, I let my membership lapse. I'm not aware of any American association, although if there were one, I would certainly sign up.
For sure.
And
I'd pay dues. Someone make it happen.
Someone make it happen. And if you want to call me, I would serve on the board, or in some other support fashion. But that Bruno made this statement not just as a private individual, but as the representative of this association, suggests that there's some validity to the counterclaim that Wonder Dice stole this man's idea.
Yeah.
And
that's a shame. It's going to scare designers off from showing their games. And that's sad. I'm sorry, Charles.
But it actually might, make some designers come up, because when you have a company that goes through basically this is a scorched earth response.
Oh, yeah.
And, when you're having a scorched earth response, then other people are emboldened. It's like, because they can make their claims, and other companies are like, well, we're not going to make the same errors Wonder Dice made. And, at this point, I'm not sure, I don't have the fiscal results of it, but, the look is very bad in general.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should bring that up, because I looked at the thread this morning, and someone accused them of stealing another game idea, just this morning,
really?
Like a few minutes before we started this podcast. I was reading the thread, and someone said they basically did this to another game a few years ago. So not a good look for them at all. I will definitely. I don't even know if they publish any games in America, but I will not be buying any of their products, and hopefully this would scare off any other publishers from doing it.
For the record, I've had the opposite experience with American publishers. I had one of my games sent back to me. In fact, now that I think of it, I've had two of my games sent back to me by publishers. They put development time into the game, came up with a lot of ideas, passed those ideas to me. We worked on them together, and then for one reason or another, the deal didn't work out and we didn't publish. And they freely gave me all the sweat equity they had put in, and said, if any of these ideas we gave you can help you get this game out to market and be successful with it, take them. We were glad to do it.
Oh, wow.
So my experience with American publishers has been very positive in that regard.
Yeah.
And I do preferentially look for people who want to collaborate. I don't want to be somebody's employee. I've done that gig. I don't do that gig. I want people to work with. Even when I teach, I don't look for a school to work for. I look for a school to work with, right?
Yeah.
And I don't talk to my students like you're my subjects and I run this fiefdom. I talk to my students about how we're going to work together for you to be successful. And that's the attitude I look for in publishers. So at least with the American publishers I've worked with, it's been completely the opposite.
Yeah. I've only worked with TMG and Level 99, but they were both amazing to work with. And I've obviously met lots of U.S. publishers, and they all seem great. The only bad experience I've ever had with a publisher is that one of them took a prototype from me and then just never returned it, and then I emailed the guy 50 times, and he never even responded to the email. So that wasn't a pleasant experience.
That happened. I've had that happen a few times. You just cut your losses and accept that sometimes that happens. These people are really busy, and they don't make a lot of money doing it either. And I just try to say, okay, bless you. Keep it. It's your prototype.
Yeah. Or they
enjoy
lose it.
Or they lose it. Yeah, that could happen too.
Yeah. But rest assured, I watched this guy's games, making sure he didn't release a similar game. I was like, okay, let me look through all these games, and he did release a game that was somewhat similar, but not similar enough for me to be like, he definitely stole my prototype and then developed it. No, but that was not a pleasant experience. So anyway, American publishers don't steal games. It'll hopefully come back to bite you. But yeah, no. So far, it's amazing that the industry is we work in a really great industry, we really do. And everybody just kind of is on the same team, and so none of the American publishers I've worked with or met, I can ever imagine, doing idea theft. But hopefully,
it happens. I was just at the opposite end of a conversation. I have a card game design, and I'm doing two very different versions of it for two different publishers. Okay. One publisher wanted the game in a bigger box, but they wanted more streamlined rules with fewer sort of gamery wrinkles in them, because they wanted to go for something they could sell at an end cap at Target.
Okay.
Right? That was their specific, this is where we want to put this game. Another company wanted a gamer's game version of it. And so I made sure both companies were very aware of each other. When I sold the small version to the first company, I told them, I'm happy to do this, but I have this gamery version I want to hold on to. I'm not going to license you guys the rights to that because I'd really like to bring that to market as well. And they said, oh yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And then this other company, when they approached me, I said, I'd love to work with you, but I have to warn you, I'm doing this version. And they said, well, could you send that to us? We just want to make sure there's no market confusion, that somebody wouldn't look at their product and mistake it for our product. And I said, no problem. That's not going to happen because they're on completely different themes.
Very different.
Yeah, without giving too much away, one of them I'm doing for Greenbrier, and I'm doing those games are about food.
Okay.
And then the other company is a comic book and game company, and they're going to be tied to some of their comic book properties. So they're going to have no So if anything, we've had really good top level collaboration where we said, okay, here's going to be two very different versions built by the same designer from the same core idea.
Yeah.
And they're going to share some rules. They're going to have some elements in common, but you wouldn't play one and then immediately mistake it for the other. You couldn't take a deck of cards from one of them and play it in the other game and expect them to work.
Yeah, it's kind of like Uwe Rosenberg, and he all the polynomial games he got out. Indian Summer and Cottage Garden especially are fairly close, but based on the same core, but very different games.
Yeah.
Or we look at all the different versions that led to Steam and Age of Steam.
And all the maps.
Right. But he did. There's a long, and he did this with several games. You can watch the DNA. You can watch that sucker evolve to become. Because I'm still a huge fan of the very first game in that series.
Oh, it wasn't Age of Steam?
No. Age of Steam was more like the culmination. There was
I thought Steam was the culmination.
No. Steam was the last, and Steam did bring some new interesting elements, but a lot of gamers would say that the peak was actually at Age of Steam. It's a more gamery game. I personally like all three. I like Steam, I like Age of Steam, and I like...
Is the other one?
No. The other one I was going to mention was Railways of the World, the
Oh.
alternate version that he did for Eagle, and then they did some variation on it. I know that what he gave them and what they finally published were not the same game, but he's never had any complaints about what they did with
I think
it.
Railroad Tycoon is based on Railways of the World, but I'm not positive.
I have not played Railroad Tycoon yet.
I played.
I don't think I have. I'm
I
not sure.
played it.
Played a
That's the
lot of
one with the
games.
big plastic pieces.
Yeah.
They have huge water towers and things. It's interesting.
That's Railways of the World.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, there you go.
Oh, maybe it was first called Railroad Tycoon when it was first released.
A lot of his games get renamed.
No, the very first one was a game called Lancashire Rails, and it was a
Oh.
huge inspiration for Rolling Freight. There's a lot of Lancashire Rails DNA in it. And then he did a series of games that eventually led to Steam. Anyway,
Well, that is a great segue into our top three. Our top three derivative games is what we're doing today. Let's start with honorable mentions. I'll start with Ultimate Werewolf because since we talked about Ted earlier, I think so. He basically took a really old game idea and just kind of distilled it and added a ton of new roles to it. We
that
played.
one was another one done in collaboration with another designer. There was a Japanese
was?
designer
Oh,
who had
okay.
already...
That's
that was One Night
That's One
Werewolf.
Night Werewolf.
I'm a
One Night
liar.
Werewolf.
That was One Night Werewolf, not Ultimate Werewolf. Excuse me.
But Ultimate Werewolf, we played that game out. We played
That was actually my number 3 game was going to be Ultimate Werewolf. Mainly because I think I remember playing Mafia probably 15, 20 years ago. And there's not much to this game. We played it with a deck of cards.
Yeah, you
and
play
it
it
was
with a deck of cards.
Yeah, it was just a regular card deck. It's and the king does what, and the queen does what. And then, but Mafia was fairly common. And then, once I started met Trey, we started playing Werewolf. And I'm like, man, there's all these roles to go through, everything to play. And I'm like, oh, I guess this is this Mafia game. But who knew it could be so well done and so well organized. And I saw a few other games that were not like the Werewolves, the Miller's Hollow, which
I almost put that on the list, but I'm just kind of redundant.
it is redundant, but it's a derivative games list. But I thought the whole, there's a few other games. There's actually a game from Trey Chambers that I really enjoyed named Detective. So
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah.
keep on
It's a print and play
Tag-
on BGG. Check it
tagging
out.
him to come out. I really like the game a lot, but
I don't
you
think
know.
I've played this one.
Yeah, if you like Werewolf, so the cool twist I added, you actually have to go to a dollar store and buy like a plastic cap gun.
Oh no!
But
Yeah.
basically, like, someone is the detective, and at any time, they can take the gun and shoot the person who's the werewolf, and that's the end of the game. Like, if they shoot someone who's innocent, then the werewolf
Werewolf
or
wins.
the serial killer wins. But if they shoot the serial killer, then the
Everybody
village
else wins.
Yeah. But what's cool is, like, the tension, because, like, there's no, like, phase or anything. It's basically, like, all on the detective. Like, if they choose to end the game and they think they know who it is, they can just pick up the gun and shoot him.
Yeah, it's very John Wayne.
Yeah.
I have a
that
feeling
manner.
I'll be playing this with my RPG crew very soon and doing a video review. So
It adds a lot of
Alright.
tension. It's pretty
watch
great.
this
Yeah.
space.
So you can continue your honorable mentions.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Liar's Dice is my other one. It was actually a pretty well-known designer, I think, that took it and made a Perudo. And basically, it's just Liar's Dice with like one extra rule. I think they added the rule about the rerolls. Is the only thing they added.
There's
So
rerolls,
Richard Borg
yeah.
is the designer
Yeah.
I know for reworking it.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, when I first learned Liar's Dice, it wasn't played with dice at all. It was played with the serial numbers on money.
Oh,
It was a gambling game.
interesting.
Yeah, if somebody called and was wrong, the person who was wrong gave their money to the other person.
That sounds like a terrible gambling game. You might as well just play LCR at that point. Have you
Um,
played that?
Yeah, I've played. Well,
Okay.
nobody's ever played LCR.
Okay.
They've
They've
experienced it. There's no
experienced
game.
it. Yes, there's no
No. This game has real serious bluffing in it.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
so yeah.
that's a game then.
Yeah.
Charles?
But you start looking at your money in new ways. If you get a 20 with a lot of nines on it, you're going to hold on to it.
Okay.
Charles, did you have any honorable mentions?
No, I know.
Did you?
So.
I do actually,
All right.
because you told me 3, and so I wrote 4, right? And my honorable mention is the circle of influence that exists between Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
Hearthstone was clearly influenced by Magic the Gathering, but now in a post-Hearthstone world, Magic has had to respond, and so it's become a conversation
Interesting.
between the two games.
Yeah, I enjoy Hearthstone, but it's funny because you could make a physical copy of it of like 90% of the cards and it would still work. So it's just like there's like 10% of the cards use like random like, and you could still replace the randomization factors with like dice or something. So,
Well, Magic has tried many times to put random factors, and so they've had to include rules on a card in 2-point font to tell you how to flip a coin and how to interpret the coin flip.
nice.
And Hearthstone just works all that in. 3 random targets means the AI is going to pick 3 random targets. Just
Yep.
And
Get
of
out of
course,
the way.
you know, Magic has finally come into the arena of, you know, bringing most of their stuff over because they do have Magic the Gathering Arena currently in beta test.
Okay.
That's available, and you know, it's still very Magic. Trust me, you still have to buy each individual series of packs, but they are all there, and it is going to be a very big release. It's going to really compete directly and try to regain some of that market share back from Hearthstone. So.
That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting.
All right, so let's go to the top 3. We already did Charles number 3. Kevin, what's your number 3?
So my number 3 is the original Funkenschlag, Power Grid.
Power Grid.
The original Funkenschlag.
That's a derivative game?
It was 100% a crayon rail game, where instead of running rail companies, you ran power companies.
Okay.
So you know how in modern versions of Power Grid, you connect different cities and you just trace a route,
Gotcha,
and you
yeah.
pay the cost of all the links on that route between a city you're connected to, you're powering, and a city you want to power.
So you used to have to draw it.
You used to have to literally draw it out on a crayon map. So the very first version of Power Grid, Funkenschlag, was absolutely a crayon rail
Yeah,
game.
I told
and,
you.
And I thought it was really neat the way it took crayon rails in a new direction.
Trey doesn't believe me when I tell him that Crown Rails used to run the genre.
Oh, yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
humongous.
Yeah,
It
crayon
was-
rails was
Never said I
huge.
disbelieved you.
Yeah.
I just wasn't into
Honestly-
gaming at the time.
Honestly, Age of Steam and games like that are at a certain level crayon rail games. You happen to lay down a tile that does what drawing with a crayon does,
Yeah.
but every time you lay down one of those tiles, you're adding track to the board. That's what a crayon rail game does. They're just doing it with tiles instead of markers.
Very interesting. My number 3 is Time's Up, which is basically just several different trivia games all shoved into one. So in Time's Up, you basically have 3 phases. In the first phase, you give clues. You can say pretty much anything you want that's not on the card itself, so very similar to Taboo. The second phase is actually probably the most original because you can only say one word, but you're building on the previous round, so you're using the same cards from round one. So there's a memory factor as well, and so you have to pick the perfect word, but you can also make sounds and do charades. And the third round is just charades, so that's clearly very derivative as well. But I really like Time's Up. I think it's a great party game. Everyone I've introduced it to has pretty much liked it, except there's a couple of people in our group that don't care for it. I think Charles is one of them, actually.
Oh no, I'm fine with Time's Up.
Okay.
I'm just not.
You're just not into it as much as some of the others.
I'm not into it as much as other people, and I don't want to play the difficult fourth round. I have no desire.
Oh yeah.
And the third round is
There's an optional fourth round.
There's an optional in the third round. You're supposed to just act out the card by just
pantomime.
Yeah,
pantomime.
charades, yeah.
And then in the fourth round, you just have to
Pose.
Yeah, you just have to
You
pose.
pose.
You don't even get to.
Yeah, you actually have to tell everyone to close their eyes for 10 seconds while you pose, and then tell them to open their eyes. It's
Yeah.
kind of annoying, but
Yeah.
So now we play Strike a Pose as a fourth round?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's very Madonna Vogue. So
I like Strike a Pose just as it is. I don't know that I need it to be another round in another game.
yeah. All right, so number 2, Charles.
yes, I'm a fanboy, but I will go back. I've said it a few times. I really enjoyed the board game Carcassonne, and I really enjoy Gwent, which is was a mini game inside of Witcher 3 that's now become a standalone game.
He says he had never played
He
that
says he's never
You
played it.
Condottiere. The designer.
Yeah, I know Condottiere, yeah.
Yeah. So
The designer of Gwent says he's never played it.
it's impossible. I mean,
Highly
Someone-
coincidental, is that what we're saying?
so either the person who made the mini game was like, "Oh, look, there's some art in this board game that I used to play as a kid. Let me just put it in,"
Oh,
or
okay.
something like that. I mean, they have like the same art.
So I don't know
style,
this
same
game at
thing.
all. I've never played The Witcher.
So
I
you
don't-
played. So you know how to play Condottiere, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they just took Condottiere, they made it a 2-player version. It had some effects. They instead of fighting over land, you fight over like rows, and your total points is what whoever has the most total points at the end of 3 rounds
Right.
wins the whole match. And the original game was very close to Condottiere in terms of mechanics and everything.
gotcha.
And it is-
Condottiere, you want to connect 4?
you want to
Am I
connect
right?
3 or 4 depending upon the
Number of players? Yeah.
or and territories. And so they took the board map and they converted it into points, and it went
I
from
gotcha.
there. But now it's almost unrecognizable. Like if you look at this game that as it exists now, you wouldn't know it at all.
wouldn't
So if
see.
you look at The Witcher 3, you'll see it's like, okay, well, this is
Okay.
what it was.
Interesting. Kevin, you're number 2?
My number 2 is Confusion. Confusion is a deduction game in which you play Stratego, except instead of you seeing your pieces and you're trying to figure out your opponent's pieces, you see your opponent's pieces, not your own. Anytime you
okay.
reach out and you move a piece, each piece has rules about how it can be moved, and your opponent tells you yes or no after you make a move. If they say yes, then that move is successful, and you go over to a record sheet, because it's a deduction game, and you scratch out anything that could not have made that move.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And if they say no, then you put your piece back where it was to begin with, and you scratch out everything that could have made that move.
Okay.
And at any point, you can say, I think this piece is a blah, blah, blah. And if you're right, you get to lay it down so that now everybody can see its movement pattern.
And you're trying to do that for how many pieces?
Well, that's one of the really interesting things about it. You don't win the game by deducing all your pieces.
Okay.
You win the game by basically playing soccer. There's a goal piece, and if you can get the goal piece into the opponent's goal, you win.
Okay.
So you don't need to figure out all your pieces. You need to figure out enough of your pieces to score the goal.
Okay.
So how much of your time you want to invest in the deduction side of the game is constantly in tension against the actual goal of the game, which is getting that goal piece into the enemy's goal.
Interesting.
That sounds good.
Very cool. My number 2 is Chameleon, which I actually played with my family yesterday, and it was a big hit. This is basically Spyfall with words. Like, that's literally what it is. So, in Spyfall, you have everyone's in a hidden location, but one person gets a card that says you're the spy, and that person doesn't know where everyone else is. So everyone else, basically, your goal is to convince everyone you're not the spy by giving clues about the location. However, if you're too obvious, the spy can say, this is the location, and if the spy is correct, then the spy wins. Well, they took that concept and they made a word game with it where there's a sheet of words in the middle of the table, and everyone gets a chart that tells them what the word is, and you roll dice, and that randomizes which word on the chart is the word. And then basically you're doing the same thing, but you can only say one word clue. So you give a clue of one word, and you're basically doing the same thing as in Spyfall. You're giving enough of a hint that you know what the word is, and it's obvious to everyone at the table that you know what the word is. But if you're too obvious, then the spy can, or the chameleon can guess the word, and then the chameleon wins. So very similar to Spyfall, but I thought it was an interesting twist, and it's actually easier to teach and to play. So I probably prefer Spyfall more overall, but it's a lot easier to get families and non-gamers into Chameleon. So that's my number 2.
And my number 1 game is, this seemed like the no-brainer. It's the first thing I thought of when we were talking about this topic, and that is the bastard child of Apples to Apples, Cards Against Humanity.
Game I still haven't played.
Who itself has many, many bastard children, such as Crabs Against Humidity, or,
Crabs with Just Humidity.
Crabs with Just Humidity, and I can't remember.
There's like a million of them on Amazon. Like, if you, it's a rabbit hole that you can never escape from. If you start looking at Cards Against Humanity derivatives, which in itself is a derivative game.
Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, this was a no-brainer. It's literally. I assume I don't have to explain to people how Apples to Apples works. You basically have. I'm not going to explain Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah, it's dirty apples to apples.
It's dirty apples to apples. It has a whole bunch of dirty children and a whole bunch of dirty cards.
Oh, sweet dog.
Sorry, folks. No. I'm going to pet the dog. There's no way that's not happening.
We have Tux. He's our mascot for. But he's being quiet today.
He is one of the
Tux.
sweetest dogs ever. He is adorable.
Oh wait, when he's exhausted, he's the best dog.
He's a sweetheart all the time, aren't you?
You want to go with my number 1 game?
My number 1 game is Black Friday by Friedemann Frese. Friedemann took all of an 18xx game and said, no, I just want the stock market, please. And built a game around just the stock market.
Just the stock market. Okay.
Yeah. The first time I saw it, it was 2 in the morning. It was either 2 in the morning on Thursday or it was 2 in the morning on Friday, depending on how you measure time. But meaning that it was after midnight and it was now Friday. And I'm at a con, and I was dead on my feet. I'm a teacher. I normally go to bed at 9 p.m., and it's 2 a.m., and I'm so dead. And Friedemann Frese walks up to me and says, do you want to play a prototype? And because I'm not a crazy person, I said, yes! Okay. Yes, I do want to play a Friedemann Frese prototype, please. And so he breaks out this game he's working on called Black Friday. And it was part of his Friday project where he developed games that he only worked on Fridays. Okay. But he was like, it's after midnight, I can call it Friday, I can work on this game. So whatever you want, Friedemann, just show me the game. And it is all about the stock market track on an 18xx board and the manipulations of that to represent stock markets. And what eventually happens is all the stock is going to crash because you're leading up to Black Friday. Okay. And you're trying to get your money into things that are going to still be worth something, like gold and silver. It's been a few years since I played it, but I always loved the way he grabbed just one piece of a game. So if you were across the room, you would say, who's playing 18xx over there and where's the rest of the map? And no, that's the game.
So you did release it, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it's published. I've played it several times. The rules are not super clear, but there's a lot of how to play videos and things out there that will get you right over that. And I was spoiled because the first time I sat down to play it, I was like, oh, I know all the rules here. Friedemann taught me. And then I opened up the rule book and I start reading it, and I couldn't quite make...
He's made some changes.
Yeah, he's made some changes, and the translation wasn't perfect, was part of the problem.
On the side,
but there are a lot of great tutorials.
Is Friedemann Frese as eccentric as his game design?
Oh, he is so delightful. He is adorable. He was in Dallas one year for Board Game Geek Con, and they took him out to go get dinner. Now, you know Friedemann Frese's theme is green, right? He keeps his hair dyed green. He wears green a fair bit. His games are always published in a green box. Friedemann found a Texan-style cowboy, like straight out of the Grand Ole Opry shirt, black with green paisleys stitched, embroidered into it. And he wore
Okay.
that proudly for the whole day. Friedemann is delightful and eccentric and wonderful. He is hilarious. He is a complete weirdo, and we love him for it.
Awesome. My number one is Risk Legacy, which is basically, if you played Risk, it's Risk. But the designer, Rob Davio, this is when actually he worked for Hasbro. He was in the stable of designers at Hasbro. And
He did some of their big titles.
yeah. And basically he took Risk and added, I think it was the first Legacy game. Basically, you make permanent changes to the board every time you play. You can like blow up areas. You can make permanent defense on areas. We had, in Risk, people often like Turtle in Australia. So the person who kept winning the game started doing that and like making Australia like his home area and like defending it even more. So it was like even more advantageous to Turtle in Australia. So what we did was we made it radioactive, and then now you can't live in Australia anymore.
Oh no!
But
But
he's
now
still-
you can spawn as the zombies in Australia,
Yeah.
the mutants,
Yeah.
not the zombies, but the mutants. That's what I did.
But he still
We nuked
lived in
somewhere.
Australia, and he did win the game even after Australia was radiated.
That's
Yeah.
And there was a
fantastic.
mole area in the center.
Oh no,
of
we
the-
made it even worse. Yeah, like he still was
He
able to
still
win
won.
a couple of times, but we just kept piling like negative effects on Australia, and now no one loves Australia. So yeah, but Risk Legacy is just an amazing game. It took like a game that was kind of simple and probably outdated by modern design standards, but then he added like victory point conditions and various other modern twists on the formula. So that is my favorite derivative game. All right, I'm probably not going to mention any games I've been playing lately because I feel like this
Yeah.
episode's already gone pretty long.
I
but
think we've hit the max for today, but
Okay.
Kevin,
Kevin,
is there
you
any games you've played recently that you want to share?
Well, I already talked at the beginning of the video about how I'd recently gotten to play and had played several times Fox in the Forest. And so definitely that's a game I'm enjoying.
Any games you want to mention besides Fox and the Forest?
Beside Fox and Forest, a role-playing game I recently stumbled upon, completely free. You're going to love it. Just on the title, you're going to love it. It's called Fortune Cookies and Nuclear War.
Fortune
It is a
Cookies.
Oh, yes,
two-person-
I'm in.
Right? So I'm going to tell you guys how this works. So it is a two-player role-playing game. One of you plays one country, the other one plays a diplomat from an opposing country. And you use real countries. The game was originally meant to be a Cold War thing between the U.S. and Russia, but when we played it, we did the U.S. and North Korea because there was a lot of North Korean activity in the news at the time. And so we wanted to do that as our theme. And the story is that you're negotiating over a meal.
Okay.
And the game is over when the meal is over. And you score it. And among other things, depending on how many compromises you were able to accomplish, open fighting might break out. So since it was originally designed over a Chinese meal, they ended the game by opening up their fortune cookies, and they used the fortune cookie story in the post-game wrap-up narrative.
Okay.
And so it got to being called Fortune Cookies and Nuclear War. Now, of the two of us who played it, one of us really loved the fortune cookie element, the other one didn't so much. But the role play of it and the scoring of it is really clever. It's a freeware game. Just go search Fortune Cookies and Nuclear War, and somebody you're buddies with who you like debating with, play this game, and it's a hoot.
Ironically, if I remember correctly, about a year or two ago, we had a incident with North Korea that happened at a dinner at one of Trump's places.
That wouldn't surprise me.
If do you remember this? Was it Mar-a-Lago? Anyway,
Mar-a-Lago, yeah.
Mar-a-Lago, but it's very close to life. I would really like to. Do you have any other games to add? That sounds...
Those are the most exciting ones I've played lately. I've played a bunch of stuff, but I haven't played any of the real new hot cut bleeding edge games recently. I've been going back and circling in on old favorites and hitting a lot of that, and I've been exploring some RPG stuff.
Oh, it's a good idea.
But if you're interested in the RPG stuff, you can go to my vlog at Bad Habit Press on YouTube, and you'll see it there.
Very cool. Charles, you want to do the outro? You want me to do it?
After you, sir.
All right. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the things that you hear all the time nowadays. We're on YouTube and Twitter at Eternally Bored. There's no underscore there. It's just Eternally Bored, and bored as in board games. Our website is also www.eternallybored.com. And that's it.
Wait, Punchboard Media?
Oh,
Punchboard Media.
Punchboard Media. Check us out on Punchboard Media.
Yes, as well.
as well. All right, until next time,
We're eternally bored, so you don't have to be.
Peace.